Let me tell you about the hardest language to learn, Ubykh. And let me add a disclaimer here. I know that the notion of how to learn is subjective, but trust me, this example is objectively one of the hardest, if not the hardest, language to learn. So, let's talk about Ubykh. The first difficulty, and the one it's most famous for, is the fact that this language has 84 consonants. Yes, 84. Here's an example of Ubykh. It's one of the languages with the largest consonant inventory, only rivaled by Khoisan languages spoken in Africa. In comparison, English only has 24 consonants. This means that if you were to try to learn this language, you'd have to learn how to pronounce many new sounds. And the thing is, English has slightly more consonants than the average language, which is often admitted to be 21 or maybe 22 consonants, which means some languages even have less. To give even more of a comparison, Ubykh has 29 distinct fricatives, while English only has 9 or maybe 10 in some dialects. What I mean by fricatives are sounds like s, f, or p. So Ubykh has more consonants of a specific type than most languages have consonant at all. It also has 20 uvula consonants, while English has 0. Here's an example of some of its uvula consonants to give you an idea. And I can't even try to pronounce some of them because I literally have no idea how to properly do it, as these consonants are all unknown to me. Having such a large consonant inventory leads to a lot of these sounds being close to each other, making it challenging to hear them without knowledge of these sounds. Here are some consonants that are similar and probably sound the same to most of you, but are yet different.
Sha, sa, sha, ta.
Can you distinguish them? If you think that the fact that the language has so many consonants is already strange and complicated, be ready for the next crazy aspect of this language. It only has 2 vowels, E and A. Most languages have at least 3 vowels, allowing a clear separation of sounds, and many languages have more than that. For example, General American English has between 14 and 16 vowels. I need to add a bit of a contrast here regarding vowels. While the language only has 2 phonemic vowels, it has a bit more phonetic ones. In other words, it has more phonetic vowels based on the consonants that surround each vowel. This means that the 2 vowels I mentioned earlier are realized differently depending on the consonants around them, leading to more phonetic vowels, such as the following ones. There are some debates regarding the vowels of Ubykh, but one thing is for sure, the phoneme inventory of the language is one of the hardest to learn. After talking about the main fact about this language that makes it popular and unique, I believe it's time to talk about the language itself and the conditions surrounding it. Ubykh is a dormant Northwest-Caucasian language. I use the term dormant here, but others might simply say dead or extinct. In other words, there are no speakers left of the language. The last speaker, Tevfik Esenç, died in October of 1992. This last speaker is also one of the reasons we know so much about this language, as he and some linguists documented it extensively before it disappeared. This language was spoken by the Ubykh people, a Circassian people who inhabited the eastern coast of the Black Sea before being deported to the Ottoman Empire during the 19th century. This period of history is what ultimately led the language to not be spoken anymore. Ubykh people gradually switched to other major languages, mainly Turkish and Circassian, which led to the disappearance of the language. Being a Northwest-Caucasian language, Ubykh shares a lot of features with other languages from the same family, although its phonology remains unique compared to the others. These other languages may have a lot of consonants too, but not to the same extent as Ubykh. By the way, if you like linguistics and languages, you can subscribe to this channel where I frequently upload videos about these topics. On top of its complex phonology, Ubykh also has a complex syntax, at least for most people. There are 2 aspects of Ubykh that can give learners a challenge. First, it's an ergative language. This means that the subject of a transitive verb is treated differently from the subject of an intransitive verb, which is treated the same way as the object of a transitive verb. I do have a video about this if you want to learn more. But what you can keep in mind here is that ergative languages are not common, and learning this new structure adds a bit of a challenge for people who are not familiar with it. On top of that, Ubykh is also an agglutinative and polysynthetic language, meaning that words are built by adding morphemes to them to change the meaning. To give you an idea of what it's like, in English, in the sentence, "I like big green apples," you have 5 words. But in an agglutinating language, most of this information will be condensed. For example, you could have only 2 words, like and apple, to which you add the information such as the size, color, who the subject is, who the object is. So it would be like, I, subject, apple, green, big, object. A lot of languages are agglutinative, and many are polysynthetic too. And if you know one of them, the concept might not be new. However, if you don't, it adds an extra level of difficulty to learn the language. On top of these 2 aspects, even the verbal system in the language is tough to understand and learn. In English, the verb just agrees with the subject. In Ubykh, verbs must agree with the subject, the direct object, and the indirect object if there is any. And also, benefactive objects may also be marked in the verb. This adds another layer of difficulty for people who are not familiar with this. On top of that, the verb system has many different conjugations, which makes it even more challenging. In all fairness, if you are familiar with one grammatical aspect of the language, it's unlikely you're familiar with all of them, making it hard for most people to learn. There are a lot of other facts about the grammar of Ubykh that I won't mention here, as they may be difficult to learn for some, but may remain common for a lot of languages. I don't want to just give you a full linguistic description of every feature as it will take too long. But keep in mind that there is plenty of other fun aspects that will make any learner have a real challenge. Let's now talk about another difficulty with this language, although it doesn't have to do with grammar this time. Like I mentioned previously, Ubykh is not spoken anymore, and that's another main challenge if you were to try to learn it. Learning a language that is not spoken anymore is not impossible, but having no speakers tend to make the task even more difficult, on top of the other difficulties mentioned. There are a few instances of languages that were considered dead, but got revived. That's why I used the term dormant before. But, even with this in mind, it makes it difficult for someone to try to learn it without speakers around that can directly teach you words or the pronunciation of the language. The difficulty in learning a language is subjective. Depending on what language you already know, your experience learning a new language might differ. For example, if you speak a Romance language, it will likely be easier to learn another one from this language family compared to someone who, let's say, only knows a language from the Germanic family. With this in mind, except if you speak a Northwest-Caucasian language, you probably will agree that Ubykh is likely the hardest language to learn. Actually, even if you speak a language from the same language family, you might come to this conclusion as well. That being said, if you disagree and think there is another language that deserves to be qualified as hardest language to learn, please let me know in the comments.